The man slowly turned around as soon as he heard the girl sing. It was the song that... Michael White was raising his daughter, who was 5 years old, by himself, but he never once complained about it. In addition to this, the man received little assistance from anyone. The fact that the young girl recognized how difficult things were for her father was evident by the fact that she hardly ever caused difficulty. In addition to this, the young lady made every effort to assist her father in every way she could. During the morning, for assistance, she would dust the home or prepare coffee for her father for him to drink. The love that Michael had for his daughter was so strong that he made it his mission to ensure that she never had to go without anything. Due to the fact that Michael's wife had passed away a year earlier under unknown circumstances, her memory continued to torment him. The tragic summer, Wendy went on vacation to Miami. For whatever reason, the woman made the decision to go swimming in the middle of a storm, and she ended up drowning. The only thing that Michael was able to retrieve from her was a few of her personal items that she had left on the beach. Her body was never found. The unfortunate man was never able to forgive himself for allowing his wife to go on vacation without him accompanying her. It was unfortunate that Michael was unable to join her due to his work obligations. "Dear, have you not been able to wait for another month? The man made the offer that Molly, you, and I could all go together, if we were to go together." On the other hand, Wendy was determined. Her decision to travel to Miami during the busiest time of year was strong. It was too late for Michael to ask her why this was so important to her. The devastated husband sank into a deep despair after receiving the terrible news, and it was very difficult for him to get himself out of it. The only thing that prevented Michael from allowing himself to get completely submerged in his feelings of loss and despair was the sense of responsibility and concern he had for his young daughter. He never went a single day without thinking, the person who would one day become the focus of his existence. Furthermore, Michael was constantly bothered by little Molly, who insisted on asking her father the same question each and every morning. "Dad, when is Mom coming home?" In order to provide his daughter with an explanation for her mother's absence, Michael continued to come up with a wide variety of excuses, with the intention of delaying the delivery of the terrible news to her for as long as possible. The man did not have the courage to tell her the truth. Michael frequently took Molly to the park, where she could feed the swans and watch the squirrels run around the trees. This was Michael's attempt to divert Molly's attention away from the troubling ideas that she was having. Michael asked Molly whether she would be interested in having a picnic by the river at some point. The man knew this idea was a good one when he saw his daughter's eyes light up with joy. It appeared to be a typical picnic by the river. Nevertheless, there was an especially large amount of people present on that particular day. As a result, Michael decided to set up his camp in a location that was separate from the rest of the people. Building a fire and beginning to fry sausage skewers was something that they did along with Molly. Molly never stopped humming the lyrics to a single song, even though it was quite basic. This song was first taught to Michael by his mother, and then Michael went on to teach it to his daughter. Although the song did not have flawless rhymes, this simply served to make it more humorous and adorable. One of the stories was told about a little child who walked into the woods and discovered a wide variety of fascinating animals there. There was not a single day that went by in which Molly did not sing the song over and over again. When the daughter and her father were sitting by the fire, she continued to sing it in a low voice. Molly approached her father and asked permission to swim in the river because the day was quite hot. At first, Michael's instinctive response was to let his daughter swim in the water. However, he later came to the conclusion that she was not yet old enough to do so and therefore kept her from doing so. Instead, the father ordered Molly either to ride the bike that was stored in the trunk of his car or play ball. After politely nodding her head, Molly continued to follow her father's suggestion. After an hour and a half, she completely forgot about her wish to go diving or swimming. Michael placed some loungers into the shade of the trees because the temperature continued to rise for an extended period of time. It was at some point that the man became so caught up in the wonderful environment and the warm sun that he fell asleep without even being aware that he had fallen asleep. Part of the reason for this was that Michael worked very hard and could only rest on the weekends. When Michael awoke, Molly was nowhere to be found, despite the fact that the guy believed that he had just closed his eyes for a few minutes at most. Following a thorough examination of his surroundings, the dad began yelling out loudly for his daughter. After that, he made his way to the water. Michael felt his heart sink as he witnessed what he saw there. The doll that Molly always brought along with her was still on the beach, along with the miniature sandals that were brought with her. There was no way this could be happening. She was not allowed to. The phrase, "I forbade her from coming near the river," was repeated over and over again by Michael as he attempted to persuade himself that Molly would not disobey him and gone to the river without his consent. As if he were an animal that had been cornered, the man continued to pace up and down the riverside. Although Michael searched through all the trees along the riverfront and even the tiny woodland that was located by the river, Molly was nowhere to be found. And only at that moment did he realize what had happened. While Michael was thinking about it, tears began to form in his eyes. God knows that she really drowned in the river like her mother, Michael thought. As soon as the man understood that he needed assistance, he immediately contacted the authorities and the rescuers. Divers spent quite a bit of time exploring the water floor, but they were unable to locate Molly's body. In this location, the current is quite powerful, sir. It might have taken the body several miles downriver. One of the people doing the search made a thorough observation that there have been occasions in which the bodies have washed up in the next state. No, no, and no. My daughter is still with us. The eyes of Michael were filled with tears as he yelled. To be perfectly honest, the authorities did not believe a single word that he had to say. In addition, they voiced the concerns regarding Michael's ability to effectively manage the duties that come with being a parent. "Are you putting the blame for what took place on me?" Michael made an attempt to excuse his actions by saying, "I fell asleep for 5 minutes," but it was extremely difficult for him to convince the policeman that he was not lying. The law enforcement officers had already arrived at their conclusions, and they were not encouraging for the father who was unable to find any consolation in this situation. The man was placed in handcuffs by the police and then moved into the patrol car. To everyone's surprise, the investigation into the case of Michael White was carried out in a very short amount of time. While this was going on, the man was under the impression that he was being framed and that someone was purposefully setting him up. In an instant, a number of false witnesses appeared before the court to testify, asserting that Michael was unable to handle his parental responsibilities and that he frequently abandoned Molly. Michael yelled out, "But that isn't true," which only served to increase the jury's unfavorable opinion of him. They were under the impression that Michael was responsible for the violation of the law that had been committed. As a result of his pain, the man was inconsolable and unable to comprehend what was taking place or the reason for the brutal treatment he was receiving. The father was given 5 years in State County Jail to serve his time. It is difficult to even begin to fathom the suffering that the poor father had to endure after the death of his wife and his only daughter. Getting out of the situation and finding the people who were responsible for framing him was the only thing the man desired. Michael was unable to sleep or even find any type of mental tranquility as a result of his thinking. Michael didn't get to finish his sentence without any problems. It was a well-known truth that he was subject to bullying and harassment by members of one of the most violent criminal gangs from the very first day he showed up in prison. By putting Michael down, they were hoping he would attack them first without thinking. After becoming aware of what was taking place, the lonely widower endured the humiliation with a stoic manner and successfully avoiding falling into their trap. He was aware that someone on the outside was genuinely interested in getting rid of him in such a savage manner. Without the assistance of one of the important inmates, it is likely that Michael would not have been able to make it to the day that he was finally released from prison Right away, Benjamin Summers saw that he was a good guy and took him under his wing. "You remind me of my dead son, Michael," said Benjamin, an older man in his 60s who had spent the majority of his life incarcerated. Playing chess, telling each other stories from their life, and discussing the literature they had read in the jail library were all activities that happened. Benjamin is the one who informed Michael that a very powerful someone spent a significant amount of money to get him murdered while he was imprisoned. To Michael, each day seemed like an eternity, despite the fact that some people would argue that 5 years is not a particularly long period. He battled with feelings of hopelessness, longing, and the memories of his previous life. And each day was precisely the same as the one before it. Michael couldn't wait for the day he would finally be able to live his life without restriction, and was drawing out the days on a small calendar. Benjamin's assistance was vital in ensuring that the hostile convicts left Michael alone. Benjamin pushed a letter that contained the phone number into Michael's palm the day before he was released from custody. "You should call this number and tell them I sent you," Benjamin told Michael. "They will help you and get your case in order." Michael looked surprised. The air of freedom made him feel high and dizzy. Michael even forgot for a short time that he was a lonely man whose daughter had died in an accident. After moving back to his hometown, the man made an effort to begin his life for the first time. At this point, most people had forgotten what happened to Michael, and some even moved him from their contact lists. There was no way that he could go back to his previous career. None of the employers were interested in hiring a person who had previously served time in prison. Without a doubt, Michael made an effort to show that he was wrongfully condemned, but no one appeared to care about his case. He put in a lot of effort, but he was unable to secure a position that would be permanent. It was at that moment that the man recalled the note that Benjamin Summers had given him. After Michael dialed the number, he was instantly given an invitation to attend a meeting that would take place at a discreet cafe. The man who had met Michael introduced himself as Stefan and, without asking a lot of information, offered his assistance to the formerly convicted man. Michael started off by saying, "I need a job, and one more thing," quite nervously. With a curious expression on his face, Stefan turned to him and added, "Don't be embarrassed. You can say whatever you need to say. The debt that I owe Benjamin is my life, and I'll do all in my power to repay it." With a sad sigh, Michael started his story from afar. Afterwards, he shared with Stefan the story of how he had lost his wife and afterwards his own daughter. Throughout the duration of this conversation, the man remained mute and only periodically asked about certain clarifications. "So, I believe that I am able to assist you. I have no doubt this situation is far from simple. In terms of the employment, everything is settled." After saying their goodbyes and raising up from the table, Stefan stated, "For the time being, you will be working at a construction site, and after that, we will see." The mood of Michael improved almost immediately. It was no longer the case that he was merely an ex-convict who had no prospects or a purpose in life. Rather, he felt like a man and a citizen of his country once more. Although Michael found the job that Stefan had gotten him to be challenging, he enjoyed it. Everything there was easy to understand. From morning till dusk, he was responsible for carrying big stones, mixing cement mortar, and providing assistance to builders who had qualifications that were higher than his own. Michael was able to sleep smoothly at night, since he was barely able to stand on his feet by the time evening rolled around. This prevented him from being tormented by thoughts of his days gone by. There was no news from Stefan after some time. The man eventually decided that he must have just thought that his job was done and stopped looking into his case any further. As a result of the fact that the firm Michael worked for offered their services to anyone who needed them, he was consistently involved in the construction of a number of various sites. Michael was a member of a company of builders who were awarded a contract to perform repairs in an orphanage where they worked. The building was very old and in bad shape. It had been needing repairs for a long time. During the repairs, the children had nowhere to go, so they just moved from one room to another. This made rooms available to repair. Michael kept thinking about Molly, who had died 7 years before, as he looked at the little orphans. The man heard an odd song one day while he was putting a plaster on one of the rooms. It was sung by one of the girls who were heading down the hallway. When Michael listened to the song more carefully, he realized it was a song about a boy who had gotten lost in a forest filled with beautiful creatures. The lyrics of the song felt strangely familiar to Michael, and he understood that it was the song. "This is the song that I taught Molly," Michael thought to himself. Upon turning back, he noticed a young lady who appeared to be very similar to his Molly. The man wasn't sure if the girl was Molly because she looked older than 10 years old. The man reached out and gently stroked her shoulder before staring intently into her eyes. Trying to sound as soft as possible, he asked, "How do you know this song?" Following a brief moment of embarrassment, the young lady said in a low voice, "I'm not sure. I am completely unable to recall anything from my past. It has been 6 years since they discovered me at the train station, but I have no recollection of anything that occurred to me prior to that time." Michael's face was damp with sweat, according to her age and the events that happened. This girl could be his lost daughter, but the man needed solid evidence to prove or deny his hunch. Michael went right to the head of the shelter to do this. The director thought about what he had heard from the man. The look on his face showed that he didn't like what Michael told him. "Are you sure this is your daughter? The girl's name is Sarah, not Molly, and all the proof we have comes down to a song. Based on what I know, you went to jail for not taking care of your own daughter, and now you want her back?" the director said, stressing the last word. Michael didn't expect to hear that answer at all. His guess could be off, and the girl could be someone else, but only Molly knows this song. And no one else has heard of it. Michael wanted to see his daughter so badly that he was ready to beg on his knees to persuade the orphanage director that he was right. Sadly, the director didn't believe Michael's idea, but he also told him he couldn't talk to the girl ever again. There was nothing the man could do, and his eyes filled with tears. Michael was sure that he was right and wanted to scream it from the rooftops, but he didn't. Of course, that's when Stefan finally called Michael. He was able to find some quite amazing information. Things worked out really well, because the man did a great job. But when Michael heard what Stefan had to say, he began to shake and tears started to form in his eyes. "Are you certain?" The man was shocked and asked. "Is this really what happened?" Stefan gave Michael a nod and showed him a picture of his wife Wendy, holding hands with a guy with grey hair that Michael didn't know. "Your wife is still alive. She planned to lie about dying so she could go live with her powerful and rich lover. This man was the one who thought of the whole plan to drown in the ocean," Stefan said. It would be an insult to say Michael was shocked. Even stranger was the next piece of news Stefan told us. "Oh, and your daughter Molly is still alive. She didn't drown in the river." "What happened to her?" Michael screamed. "While you slept, your wife and her lover took Molly. Their plan was for the girl to live with them. They paid to have you killed in jail, but after a year, Wendy broke up with her boyfriend, so she left her daughter at the station to start dating someone else," Stefan said. Michael started to cry. It was only at that point that they came to the realization that he had wasted 5 years of his life serving time in prison for the mistakes of other people. Upon further investigation, it was discovered that Molly had suffered a nervous breakdown and lost her memory as a result of her shocking actions taken by her mother. It was because of this that Molly was unable to remember her own name and didn't recognize Michael when she was at the orphanage. "You are free to surrender these documents to the authorities. Simply do not reveal the source from where you got them." The parting statement that Stefan made was, "You have to understand that what I have to do isn't always legal." Michael did what he said and got to work. A little over 2 weeks later, Wendy was taken into custody in a hotel in the state of California, where she was discovered to be in the arms of yet another wealthy man. The allegations that were against the woman were sufficient to warrant her being imprisoned for a considerable amount of time. Michael chose not to attend the court hearing because he did not wish to look into the eyes of the woman who had deceived him and taken away his freedom as well as his family. Rather than that, he was successful in obtaining custody of Molly and took his daughter to a specialist who assisted her in regaining her memories. Molly was able to navigate her way back to her previous life and prevail over the challenge by gradually recalling her events from the past. Michael felt that he was floating on cloud 9 now that all the trials were over. After going through so many bad things, he came out on top.